right, so it's 4 p.m. EST on the dot. Welcome to our workshop. I hope that you guys are here to learn about how to write a kicking resume and how to get that job. I'm Wamia, one of the co-hosts of the workshop. I go to the University of Alabama. All my Alabama people, drop a roll tide in the chat. I'm doing my Master's of Accountancy. I'm starting in the fall, and I'm also serving as a district governor for the Alabama district. One of the most memorable quotes that I actually
so it's okay.
That I actually picked up from the busy streets of New York was, just because you're tired doesn't mean you can be disrespectful. That's something that I heard a man telling his son, and it kind of stuck with me. So yeah.
Hi everybody, I'm Coehl Gleckner. I go to the Rochester Institute of Technology in the New York district. I'm studying game design and development, getting my BS and my MS at the same time, and I'm serving this year as New York District's executive assistant, as well as a co-vice president of the Rochester Institute of Technology. A quote that's really stuck with me over the years is this quote said by Reggie Fils-Aimé, who, if you don't know him, he is the immediate past president of Nintendo of America, kind of a big figure in gaming. And he said, if it's not fun, why bother? Kind of, if you're not enjoying yourself while doing something, you should really consider why you're doing it at all. So getting right into our first big deep dive. So if you could answer this in the chat, that would be awesome. But a deep dive is basically this question to kind of think about and go a little bit deeper on. And the deep dive is, what is the one thing you want your potential employer to take away from your resume? And we'll give you a couple of seconds to answer it while me and Wamia answer it. Wamia, would you like to answer it first?
Yeah, for sure, Cole. So for me, I just want them to know that I'm someone who's ambitious, someone who's a go-getter, and I'll go above and beyond to get what I want done, and that I also can kind of juggle multiple things at once, and that I'm the right fit for their company because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd say for myself, it's really making sure that they know how I have this creative side to me. I also have this very technical side to me. I am someone who strives to be a leader and wants to be active in my community through Circle K and Kiwanis. Kind of all these parts come together to make me this really good applicant for the position, and that they want me to come work with them, that they can kind of get that first read of me and know that I'm this kind of fun person to work with and wants to be active in the community.
We have a couple of great answers. Hope says, I'm my best self and continuing to improve. Someone said, variety of work and volunteer experiences. These are awesome answers. There are so many more. If you guys need ideas, please read through them.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get to this, a couple of housekeeping rules. Please have your cameras muted so there's no weird sounds coming in. So mic's muted, cameras on, please, because we love seeing your beautiful faces. And yeah, keep on typing your answers, because we're gonna have a lot more prompts throughout the workshop. So yeah, keep on typing away. So let's get to it. What is a resume? So I'm pretty sure all of us have had a resume at some point in our lives. Some of us made them in high school. Some of us kind of rewrote it in college. But what is it? It's basically an overview of what we've done, all our experiences, work experiences, volunteer experiences, and all of that. And they're important because they're usually the first thing your interviewer or your recruiter or potential employer looks at before they decide if they want to hire you or even consider hiring you. It's your brand. It's how you market yourself in the professional world. And as you all know, it can lead you to interviews and jobs. So it kind of boils down to the question Cole asked earlier. What do you want your resume to say? What kind of story do you want it to tell your employers? Is it that you're someone who's ambitious, someone who can work through college, so that means that you can do a lot of things at once? Is it that you're someone who's really smart? So it's basically what you want to convey. So moving on to the next question, what do you think should be the first section on your resume? So this is something you guys can kind of answer. Awesome. Yeah, so we have a couple of the right answers coming in. So whoever said yes, a review about yourself, so your name, your contact info, but right after that, we have the education portion of your resume. So that is correct. So yeah, so as this nice template kind of shows, you want to have your name and your address, your current address, to let your employer know where you're living, so that they know which branch they want to hire you in. You want to have your phone number, and if you're still in school, you do want to have your college email address so that they know that you're still in college. But if you're not, make sure that you have a good professional email, so it's not something you made in 5th grade, please. We don't want your gamer name on there unless you're a game developer. And but let's kind of talk about the formatting first. So with your resume, you want to make sure that it's consistent. As you can kind of see here, that all the fonts the same, it's the same font size, font type, every bullet point doesn't have a period at the end, so make sure that if one of your bullet points don't have a period at the end, none of them do. So it's kind of like how it works. You want to make sure it's really consistent. And you also want to make sure that if your subheaders are a font larger, then all of your subheaders are the same font size as well. So with your education, love that some of y'all got that right. You want to have your school, your degree, and you can also have your minor and your GPA in there. So you only usually want to put your GPA in there if it's above a 3.0. Otherwise, you can leave it off. It's not really a red flag. But if you have a major GPA, I'm in accounting, as y'all kind of know. So I have a major GPA that's separate from my overall GPA. So if your major GPA is higher than your overall GPA, it's okay for you to put that in there as well. So moving on to the work experiences, you kind of want to have the name of your employer, as this kind of shows, and insert your key responsibilities and accomplishments. For this one, it's really important for you to kind of showcase what you accomplished and what you learned. If you want to put numerical values in there, so if you worked and handled accounts that were over a couple $1,000s, you want to put that number in there. And you also want to make sure that your date's right, so the month, year, that's all in there as well. You also kind of want to keep it to 3 bullet points for the work experiences, because otherwise it can kind of seem like a lot, or if you have less than 3, it can kind of seem like you didn't do much at your job. And for the extracurricular activities, it's usually stuff like Circle K, so you can put that on there if you want to. You can, the next section kind of says community service, but you can also kind of mesh them together, so extracurriculars and community service. I know I do that, and that's totally fine, but if there are other organizations that you're a part of, you can include that in your extracurriculars as well. So yeah, moving on to the technical / language skills portion of your resume. So yeah, so you can also include any technical skills. So if you are someone who's really well versed in Microsoft Access or Excel or some coding language, definitely put that on there, because that is a plus point for you, because not a lot of people have that, right? I'm going to remind everybody to mute their microphones again, just so there are no bufferings. And then if you're bilingual or trilingual, put that on there as well, because people want to hire people who can communicate with a large variety of people as well. So that's definitely something you want to include in your resume as well.
And apart from those sections, you might have other sections as well. For me personally, making games, a really important section to always have on your resume is projects. This can be anything from personal projects to class projects, but having this section on there ensures that you're showing off your potential to employers. They know that you're doing more than just the bare minimum in school, and that you're really wanting to be kind of this active participant with them. You might also have relevant coursework depending on your major. Certain classes might be really impressive that you've taken, like a really high level graduate class as an undergrad could be very important, especially if it's similar to the job that you're applying for, something like in computer science networking. If you've taken a high level networking course and you're applying for a job that's all about networking, that could be super good to show off to the employer to show that you're qualified for the position. As well as certifications and licenses. If you acquire any of these through your time in school, or you take your time outside of school to go for a certain certification or license, show them off in your resume. This shows that you're taking initiative, that you're a person who wants to do more than just what your school is offering. And it's, again, a really good thing to show to your employer that you are a qualified person and strive to do more. With research experience, this is especially important in fields that are very research heavy. Like if you're someone who wants to go into the research at your college and are applying for a position there, showing off that you've already worked with a professor that's on that team could be really, really important to go and get you that position. As well as volunteer experience. This is kind of similar to Circle K. This can be a lot of different things. It might be that you were volunteering at your dad's tech firm or one of your parents' tech firms. And did a lot of the work on their servers or something like that. Kind of depends on the different things you've done in your time, all these different experiences. Make sure to show them off on your resume, because you never know show them off if they apply to the job that you're going for. Next up is what to not include on a resume. So these are things like hobbies and interests. If you're applying for a job that's a doctor, you don't really need to show off that you're really, really into trains and have this huge train set and go to competitions for it and all that kind of stuff. Kind of make sure it's relevant for the job you're applying for. You also don't need to show off all of the classes you've taken. A lot of the times when a lot of students, say your class is, like for me, my class size is 200 people in my year, showing off that you passed the freshman level coding classes isn't really that impressive and doesn't really make you stick out from the pack. So make sure you're only putting classes on there if they're really impressive. Avoid using I, we, and our. This is more of a consistency thing. All resumes don't really have I produced this. It's more just produced blank. It's assumed that since it's your resume that it's always my stuff on there. So you don't need to use I, we, or our. Lastly, for high school information, unless you're a freshman or a sophomore and the experience is particularly impressive, you really want to try to avoid this. This is mostly because employers are looking that you're active now, not that you were active a bunch of years ago. So if you had a high school experience that you worked in like sophomore year of high school that is now on your senior year resume, it kind of gives off the impression that you haven't been doing much for the past couple of years. So make sure your experiences you're showing off are actively recent. So another question for you all, as we've gone over all the different parts of resume sections, do you think all resumes have to follow a similar format? Yeah, we can see just from the first couple answers, the answer is no. They do not. Depending on your major and what you want to go into, your resume might look completely different. For example, mine and Wamia's look totally different. For me, mine's very creative. I really want to show off that I have this creative side to me while also being technically impressive. It's very bulky. I wanted to make sure to show off a lot of very specific key things. But with Wamia's, Wamia, if you want to talk about yours.
Yeah, so mine is a very generic accounting template that's given to us by our career center. So if you guys have one of those, do hit them up. But as you can see that it's like super consistent and it's kind of spaced out because that's how the accounting firms kind of want it to be. And they kind of look at it to be like, they want it to be like that. So yeah, it's very different. It's not colorful. It's not super creative, but that's just because of the field that I'm in as opposed to the field that Coehl is in. But I guess one of the things that is similar about both of our resumes is that they are both one pages. So you really do want to make sure that most of your resumes don't go over a page because employers usually don't look at resumes for a long time. They just look at it for like 5 or 10 seconds actually. And if it's like 2 pages, they might not want to look at the whole thing. So yeah, and as Cole said earlier as well, make sure you're updating your resume constantly to reflect the things that you're currently doing. So with that, these are a couple of action verbs that you can use under those bullet points that you have in your resume. So verbs like analyzed or communicated or chaired if you're a committee chair in your club or your district, organized, planned. These are really good action verbs that kind of let employers know exactly what you did and accomplished. And if you guys are ever short on action verbs or don't really know what to put, if you just Google action verbs for resumes, there's this one search that's at the top. It gives you like 185 action verbs that you can use. So like use Google, use your resources. It's all really great, but make sure you are using action verbs when you're describing your work experiences or your leadership experiences. So the next slide kind of shows example from Cole's resume, actually, super impressive. But as you can see that he kind of uses a different action verb for every bullet point. So it's not like worked as a virtual emergency scenario trainer, what is that? Or worked as the lead developer. He kind of explains exactly what he did, all the positions or all the team positions that he held, but made sure that he used different different bullet points. So created tools, and they're all very like they are action verbs, or they're all very descriptive in itself. So they tell you exactly how he did it and what he did. The next slide shows examples that y'all can use as Circle K members. So if you're a club president, using words like implemented, planned, hosted weekly meetings, that's very important. Or if you're a committee chair, you're collaborating with people to make things come to life. So collaborated with peers. Or if you're calling for donations, cold call businesses. And as you can see in these examples too, they all have they're all like quantified. So University X chapter from 0 to 40. So that's how you're quantifying how you implemented various marketing initiatives to increase membership. Or if you're a planning committee, look how it kind of said raised over $2,000. So it's quantifying what you did, because employers love to see numbers. They all rely on numbers to kind of gauge how great you are, which, yeah. So if you're a general member, you can say stuff like completed over 200 hours of service. Make sure you're saying that, because if you just said completed service, they're going to be like, okay, we're all doing some kind of service, but how much did you do? And another thing I would like to point out here is look at the consistency of it. Every bullet point has a period at the end. So make sure you're kind of following that in your resume as well. So this is kind of the way to write the perfect bullet point. So the action verb or your skill, so collaborated, what you did, you collaborated with peers to raise $2,000. That's your result or outcomes. So what we would like you to do.
You can smell it? I could smell it from a mile.
So what we would like you to do is come up with your own perfect bullet point in the chat below. So let's see, it could be anything related to Circle K, anything related to your work.
You could even rip them directly from your resume.
Yes, if you have something great, please share. Let's see if I can come up with something on the spot. Hosted a workshop on resume skills and resume building and interview skills with 74 participants. Okay.
Yeah, and they're usually, with finding the perfect bullet point, you're going to craft it once, and it's something that you're going to come back to again and again. It's not going to be this one and done thing where you write what you think is like the ultimate bullet point and you never have to touch it again. It's something you'll constantly be updating. Maybe you see your friend's resume and they have a better word for something than you did, so you just kind of steal their nice word for it. It's this iterative process that takes a lot of time to find really, really strong bullet points that you usually don't get right on the first time. So don't feel too bad about it.
Yeah, so if you guys have a draft that you would like to share, please go ahead. I know that with my resume, I've like rewritten the bullet points so many times, changed the action verbs a lot too, so it's all good to do that. So does anybody want to even come off mute to share an example? Anybody? Ooh, look at that, Peony coming in. Spearheaded a committee to coordinate large-scale overnight conferences that convened hundreds of students. That's awesome. That's a great example. So if you guys want to look at the chat and kind of look at that example, that's an awesome example of what you can kind of put in your resume as well.
Mm-hmm. And you can see there's kind of direct mentioning of multiple things. So overnight conferences, hundreds of students. It kind of touches on multiple things that employers will look at and be like, ooh, that's really cool. Same with implemented 30 housing units to promote the development of local rural communities. Same thing, it's got that direct number in there as well as what it's doing. And if an employer or a recruiter wants to ask you about it, they know exactly like what to ask about. They don't have to kind of get a very vague question. They can say, oh, how did you decide on the number of housing units you're going to build? How did you achieve over 100 members? Anything like that.
Yeah, and if you guys like something in the chat that you see, feel free to steal it. I'm pretty sure anybody will mind.
Mm-hmm. But feel free to continue putting them in the chat and we will continue moving on. So the real point of your resume is trying to sell your best self. What did you learn from an experience? What was the point of it? Like, what is the lesson you took away? A lot of the times, employers will kind of ask you about this when you're in an interview, as we'll talk about later, but you really want to make sure that you understand why that class project was valuable for you, why joining this committee was valuable, the things you learned from it, and show those accurately on your resume. Also, personal projects that you work on outside of school are oftentimes better than class projects to show off on your resume. It shows that you're taking initiative outside of just class to go above and beyond and really test your own skills without having instructors kind of telling you how to do things. This is except for a class project that you might have done something amazing on, like really, really tried, went above and beyond, and pushed the project to new heights. That could still be worth showing off on your resume. Experiences that are on your resume should relate to the job you want. So if you're applying for a graphic design position, showing off that you were an accounting intern at another company might not be that valuable. They might be looking for very specific skills, and if you have them, then you should definitely be showing those off on your resume, even if they aren't necessarily the most like impressive experiences. Even if it's just a minor position at a firm, it's still really impressive to show, or really good to show off that you have relevant skills to what they're looking for. And tying kind of into that, if it's not related to your field, why is it on your resume? It's not always a bad thing. Like personally, Circle K doesn't really have anything to do with making games, but it's still really good to show that I am this person who's very invested in the community. I want to do better or I want to make the world better for people. And a lot of companies will kind of feel similarly, and especially if the company's culture is similar to that, they'll be interested in talking more to you. You can kind of see this on this part of the resume. So it's another example from a Circle K, but this time using an internship position. You can see a lot of very specific things that she talks about, like managing social media accounts, locating potential customers, kind of these specific things that an interviewer can look at and say, okay, this person already has experience with these. That's perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. And it works amazingly. So what are some techniques you might use to apply for a specific position at a company? We've kind of hinted at this or said it directly a couple times, but what are some ideas that you guys have? I think there's tons of different techniques that you can use. From talking with people as we were creating this workshop, we learned even more different techniques. And there's so many different ways that you can go about this, especially for specific positions. And if anybody wants to come off mute and say some, that's fine too. Feel free to share.
I would like to share something.
Sure.
So I took a speech class, I think sophomore year of college, and we were doing an interview segment for the speech class. And my professor told me that if you're interviewing for a specific job at a specific company, to look up their website. And he said that a lot of times they will use certain terms on their websites over and over. And if you use that in their interview, they will love you.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's something that's super, super important. We'll just jump to the next slide. That's like something from like right at the start, a resume pre-screen. A lot of times companies will have programs in place to look for specific words or phrases on your resume. So having those off the bat, and especially using them during the interview, showing that you already are familiar with like the company lingo, as it's called, makes you a much more qualified person and makes them not have to bring you up to speed with that lingo beforehand, so that you can just jump right in and start doing work. This can also be other like specific words and phrases, not only from their website, but if you're applying through like LinkedIn and on the job description, they're mentioning certain techniques or certain, like they word things a certain way, reflecting that in your resume and showing like, for example, if they talk about a specific technique like coding in a certain language, making sure that you have that same language showed off on your resume, super, super important. We'll kind of skip the part of they have to kind of gauge if you know this language or not. They already know that you've worked on a project with it. It also helps the recruiter know, kind of, again, speed up the process of them having to figure out if you know these things. You're showing it off for them right off the bat, so they know they can skip those questions in the interview, or at least get them more in depth. Relevant skills and work to the position should always be first. So it should always be your most relevant things at the top, even if it's not the most recent. Sometimes that rule is kind of toyed with a little bit, but usually you want to make sure if a company is looking for a very specific thing, show that off on your resume. Same thing. With reverse searching is kind of a technique where you might be able to find someone's resume online that has gotten the position before. So a lot of big companies like Microsoft, like Apple, will have reoccurring internship positions where they're testing people, and you can usually find someone's resume online that's similar or has gotten that position before. This is really good because you can kind of pick apart what they did on their resume to get the position. Maybe they had a project that was very specific for the internship that year, and you can kind of use theirs as an example. Don't copy directly from it, because chances are the recruiter will remember that resume if they got hired, and then they will see the same things on yours and be like, something's up here. So don't directly copy it, but use it as an example. And lastly, using a master resume. This is something we got from one of our workshop reviews. So a master resume is essentially this longer version of a resume that might be 2 or 3 pages long and contains all of the information that you've done, all the experiences that you've had throughout college. And when you go to apply for a position, you just pick out the parts that you want to include. So say on a master resume, you have 7 projects. You'll want to cut that down to 3 when you're actually applying and making it that 1-page resume. You're picking the specific parts that you think are most important to show off to that position, that specific position, to get the job. And you're just keeping them all on hand so that in the future, if you need another one, if you're applying for a new job and one project is better than another, you can just swap them out on your real resume that you're using to apply and very easily come up with a bunch of different resumes without having to rewrite them every single time. So going back to that same resume part from before, you can see there's some very specific things that we've underlined that could be really important to show off to an employer. So looking at the last line, directly mentioning MailChimp and Cloud HQ could show to a potential marketing firm that you already know these software and can just jump right into the work without having to be kind of onboarded into the process. Same with Excel spreadsheets and designing graphics for Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. you're showing off that you have these skills already, so the employers know that you are qualified for the position.
So let's talk about how to add more to your resume. So you can join more extracurriculars. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people have joined Circle K or want to do more in Circle K because they're good fillers for your resume. Leadership experiences, just volunteering. These are really good resume items that employers want to see. But other than that, you can also look for internships. You can start your own personal projects. If there's a passion project that you really want to work on, this business you want to start, do that, because although you might not do it for your resume, it is good for your resume. You can, as I said earlier, you can take on a leadership position, or if you're someone who's in the field of law or medicine, you can also do shadowing experiences which is basically where you follow people around during their workday and kind of see what they do. Those usually go into work experiences, and they're really good for your resume as well. So I have another question for you guys. What do you think are some common mistakes made on a resume? You can use the chat function. Spelling mistakes. Yes, lots of colors. Love that. Love those answers. Bad grammar. All right. If you look at the next slide, you'll actually see that those are actually all the points. You guys got it all right. So spelling mistakes, grammar errors, screen through your resumes, make sure that there are no grammar errors or spelling mistakes there. Go through Grammarly, go to your career center, because employers, if they see that, they'll know that you're a person who doesn't look over their work, and that's a no-no, right? Sloppy format or fonts. Do not use Comic Sans on your resume. Use good fonts. As we kind of mentioned earlier, keep it consistent. It's okay to use one or two colors, but if you get too creative, as this says, or as Amna said, too many colors, it can kind of take the attention off of the content, and it will like, they will focus more on the formatting, and they'll be like, okay, I don't want this person's like, no. You don't want it too long or too short. So as we kind of said earlier, not longer than a page, but also you don't want it to be like half a page, right? So because what did you do in college if it's like half a page? And I know Cole said earlier, if you know a coding language, put it on there. But if you don't know it, do not put it on there, because when you get into the job, they will expect you to know it. So if you can only say like, ¿Cómo estás in Spanish? Do not say you're fluent in Spanish. They will put you in a situation where you'll need to use the skill of yours if you don't. And if you don't have it, don't put it in there. Yeah, so moving on to the interview.
So once you've kind of mastered the resume, it's time to move on to the interview. If your resume is good enough, the company will be interested in you, and you'll sit down for your first interview. But what is an interview? It can be over the phone, it can be a video call, it's probably what it's going to be nowadays, or it could be in person. They can be anywhere from 5 minutes to over an hour. They can range from a pre-screening interview, a technical interview, an informal interview. There's a whole bunch of different kinds, and it's really just a way for the recruiter or the person on the team you'd be working for, or someone else at the company, to find out what kind of person you are and see if you're the kind that they would like to work with, that you fit their company culture. Interviews are typically held by a recruiter, project manager, or someone on the team you'll be working for, and they will all kind of change a little bit. They will change how the interview works a little bit, depending on who they are. A recruiter might be more surface level, whereas someone on the team might dive deep into questions that they think you need to know to be a good fit on their team. So some tips for interviews: treat your interview like it's a first date. Make sure you're staying positive, make sure the conversations aren't one-sided, and be confident throughout the interview. Making sure the conversations aren't one-sided is a super, super important point, because a lot of people take interviews as this just kind of, they're asking you questions, they just want to hear about you, but that's not really true. They're also gauging how well you would fit at the company. So making sure that you're asking them questions back, making sure that you are keeping it as an open conversation instead of just a Q&A session, super, super important. Also, be prepared to elaborate on every single one of your points on your resume. super, super important. As Wamia said earlier, if you're including things that aren't exactly true, you're going to get called out on it at some point, and it's going to look really bad for you when you do that. And beyond that, if you just wrote that resume point like the night before and weren't really sure about it, and they ask about it, or they ask you about it during the interview and you kind of fumble, it again doesn't look the best. So be prepared to talk on and on about each of your resume points to really show that you really spent your time to craft this perfect resume for this job. An idea that might help you get ready for that interview a little bit is have your friend interview you beforehand as this kind of warm up. I'd say for a lot of people, once you start talking about yourself, kind of getting into a lot of the details about what makes you such a qualified person for this position, or just an awesome person in general, it becomes easier to do it over time. Especially for a lot of general interview questions, it's better to have that warm up round before you go in for the real thing.
Awesome. So I think Madeline mentioned it earlier, but you can look at the job description to make sure you know the technical lingo for the job. So if they use words like coding, or if you're in accounting and they use words like 1040 or auditing, make sure you know those words, because they're going to be very important when you get into the interview and they're like, oh, you know what we're all about. Cool. So apart from knowing that, you can also look it up and see what they actually mean, so that if you get into a conversation about it, you can correctly explain those processes, and they'll be super impressed. You can LinkedIn stalk your company. You can just look at your company website, or if you know who your interviewer is, you can kind of stalk them on LinkedIn too, so that that's part of doing your research, so that you kind of know what to expect when going into the interview. You can also look up common interview questions online, so stuff like, tell me a little bit more about yourself. Tell me a time where you felt kind of beaten down. What did you do to overcome it? So those questions are common interview questions, but there's so many more. So just look it up. I'm pretty sure you will come up with something. And also have specific questions to ask the interviewer. So they can be questions like, what kind of accounts do you guys work on? What kind of, if you're kind of like Cole and a game developer, that's a good tip, Derek. If you're a game developer, you can kind of ask, what kind of games do you guys work on? So be sure to have those specific questions, because they'll be very impressed that you really want to know the nitty-gritty of the company. Moving on, you also kind of want to stay away from use of slang. So by slang, we don't only mean like curse words and stuff like that. We mean even stuff like lit or woke. You might sometimes get comfortable in an interview if it's someone your own age, but make sure you're kind of staying away from that, because you do want to keep it professional. You have to answer questions fully. So if they ask you about Circle K on your resume, if you're like me, a lot of your resume is Circle K stuff, right? So if they ask you about it, you can't just be like, oh yeah, we volunteer, be sure you have a concrete answer. Know what you want to say. It's a global movement. It's an international organization of servant leaders, anything. Just make sure you have a story related to it. You should also bring extra copies of your resume and on resume paper, hopefully, because if you're handing your resume out, you don't want it to be a flimsy A4 size paper. Resume papers are awesome. They're impressive, especially for college students. Make sure you have an extra copy with you too, even if you're not handing it out, because it's important to kind of look at it and look at the points that you made on your resume. And it's okay for you to stop and think before answering questions. So you can take a little pause, tell them you're thinking about the question, because you don't really want to come in and like answer it halfway. And yeah, also avoid saying, no, I have not. So if they ask you a question and you don't kind of want to stay away from the negatives, you can always say, I want to learn, or I haven't yet, but I will, or something like that, so that they know that you're someone who's teachable. Don't ask about salaries. Don't ask them how much you're going to get paid. That's a question for later. You'll find out in your offer letter if you get one, but that's that's not one of the specific questions you want to have ready for your interviewer. That's a complete no-no. You want to write a thank you note, hopefully within the first 24 hours of your interview, probably not right away, because you do want to give them a little time to kind of settle down after the interview, but you do want to give that. They love that. They'll remember you. Your thank you note can email or note can kind of include something like, hey, remember this conversation we had, or this is what I took away from the interview. Love talking to you, or anything like that. Also, again, there are thousands of templates online that you can kind of look at if you're confused. And then dressing appropriately. If you are someone who's wearing shoes and a belt, if you want to comment below what they should do, you can, but they should match, right? So if you're wearing a brown belt, make sure your shoes are brown too. Or if they're black, make sure your shoes are black. Also, just, you can never be overdressed for interviews unless you're wearing a tuxedo. Don't wear a tuxedo to an interview, but you could ask your interviewer or your recruiter, like, hey, how should I dress? Business casual, business professional, and kind of dress appropriately. Or if you are wearing makeup, make sure it's not too much makeup, because you kind of want them to focus on your brains, not your face, right? So stuff like that. And if you're on a Zoom interview or a Skype interview, because that's super important now considering the situation, make sure that you're properly dressed, because if you're like wearing a nice blouse but you're wearing like shorts underneath, what if you have to get up to grab a charger, right, or something? What if, like, if something happens? You want to make sure that you're dressed up properly head to toe, even if they can't see it, because you never know what might happen. Also, while we're on like Skype/Zoom interviews, make sure the lighting's right. I am someone who moves their hands a lot when they're talking, but make sure that your hands are within the box. You don't want it to go all over the place, like outside of the screen or something like that. So make sure that's a good tip too, because I know that's something I had to consider when I had to do an online interview. So this is a typical question that you usually get during an interview, which is, tell me about yourself. So we have two examples in front of you. The first one is, hey, my name is Sam, blah, 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 things that are already on my resume that you can see. That's not how you want to answer this question. Example two, which, yeah, that's actually how you would love to, like, how you would answer the question. So this is the kind of answer that kind of tells your story, that kind of leaves a lot of open ends for interviewers to pick things out of. So there are buzzwords like Circle K International, community service, leadership skills, criminal justice. So these are all questions. This kind of, like, as Cole said earlier, gives them something to start a conversation about. So if anybody wants to come up with their own example, they can. But Cole?
So typically when I'm answering this is usually the first question they're giving you at the interview, because it kind of sets the tone for how the rest of it will go. I'll talk about something that I've been doing recently. So I remember when last time I went to the career fair at my school, when we were still in person, I talked about how I had just been tutoring students in the labs beforehand. So tell me about yourself. Hi, I'm Cole. I work as a tutor in our labs here at school. I work with students to make sure they comprehend the material, that they really not only, I don't only answer their question, I make sure they have a mastery of the systems that they're working on, and that I teach them a few tips and tricks about the software they're using to make sure next time when they have these same issues, they're able to deal with them a lot quicker. Would anyone else like to share what they would do or how they would answer this question? All right, Wamia, how about you answer?
Yeah, so whenever someone asks me this question, I usually take a deep dive into my personality. I start with, hey, I'm a campaigner by nature. I love motivating other people. I love keeping the energy up in situations, in work situations where the energy might not be super positive. I like volunteering. I like helping people. I like seeing that light go out in their eyes if I help them with something or if I explain something. And then I talk about Circle K or my work experiences, and that just kind of gives them a lot of questions to ask about me. But also another tip, if you're someone who can't really think of something on the spot, or if you're someone who likes to be prepared, you can also have like a 30-second elevator speech ready for yourself, something like example 2, that you can kind of like give the spiel whenever. So make sure that you don't have it like memorized to the T, but it's just something that you can pick out and kind of say whenever you're posed with a question. How long should this part ideally be? Cole, do you have an answer?
Yeah, so typically for a lot of interview questions, you want to stay within a time frame of like maybe 2 minutes maximum. You don't really want to be dragging on and on about a point unless they ask you to. If they ask you to elaborate or go more in depth into something, go to town, keep talking, don't let it end. But if they're just asking you, like, tell me about yourself, keep it somewhat short. Have a point to it. Don't just start rambling about things. Make sure you're trying to get a certain point across. So for Wamia, it's that she's a campaigner by nature. And you can see that throughout her answers, that she's always trying to help people. Same thing with me. When I'm talking about being a tutor, I want to get across that I'm this person that's willing to work with others to make sure that they can excel just as I had the opportunity to before when I was tutored. So making sure that you're kind of getting your point across with whatever your answer is, but making sure to keep it not too long, but definitely not too short. If it's too short, again, or if it's too short or too long, like a resume, it's going to be noticeable, and they might not appreciate your answer as much, or they might get, zone out a little bit, and you really want to make sure that they're focused on what you're saying. No problemo. But other than that, Wami, do you have anything else to say about this slide?
Not about this slide, but Derek had a great answer. Yeah, a 3-part answer to an interview is great. Interview question is great. So direct answer, this is what I did, explain why you did it, and you can always go into like, hey, this is how I can apply it to your company. So that's a great answer, Derek. Thank you.
But other than that, does anybody have any other questions that they'd like to ask about anything? And I saw, Amna, you asked a question about being humorous during an interview. I think it kind of depends on your personality a lot of the time. And I like Kevin's answer with, you can have a sense of humor but not be offensive. You can definitely be lighthearted during an interview, and a lot of the times they want to see your true self. So definitely be that lighthearted, jolly person you can be. But don't take everything as a joke. Make sure you're still serious. You can be cracking a joke every now and again, but they're here to make sure that you're a fit for their company. So they want to make sure that you're qualified for the position.
Yeah, I want to kind of take us back to that statement that treat it like a first date, right? You want to be kind of interesting. You want to let them know that, hey, I can joke around, but also you don't want to take everything as a joke. Like if they ask you about your personality, you don't want to be like, oh yeah, like joke around about it. You kind of do want to give them the sense that you can be serious. Yeah.
Because something I always think about is when people think of being in an interview, like just become like so stern and you don't move your body. I feel like that is like the first thing usually people think of. That's what I used to think about first. Then I started doing interviews and I was like, I can't stay serious so long. I need to smile or like crack a joke. So I need to find that balance. I guess like practicing during interview, like with your friends can help with that. So that was a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you could always actually start with that, like, hey, I'm a little nervous, sorry. But they kind of like it when you break the ice, because chances are they're a little nervous too, because they're trying to hire you, right? What if you don't like the interviewers? Like that's on them. So it's okay to kind of say that, hey, I'm a little nervous. It's okay to, so yeah. But someone said right now that being friendly can show confidence, and people like funny people too. So yeah. It's important. Show your personality.
Yeah, and I think really like it's to show like who you are as a person. Like if you are that straight-faced stern person, you don't need to force yourself to make like bad jokes. You can still be that stern person, and that's absolutely fine. It's about showing off who you are to make sure they see that you're being honest with them. They don't want to have someone who's lying on their resume and lying to their face come work at their company. How do you, June asked, how do you describe a personality? It's kind of like, it's like, it would be phrased more in a way, how would you describe your work style is how that usually would be asked during an interview. And it's kind of describing, like how you work with other people, going into like a specific example or in a story is a great way to show your personality off, because it can show like a specific instance of how you reacted to something. So say a team member wasn't responding to group texts, you can describe how you dealt with that situation, how you eventually solved it. And when they ask you to ask them questions, we said earlier, definitely have some prepared, but if you come up with something during the interview, like you learn about what their position was before they were interviewing people, maybe they were a software developer lead, or especially if they're on a team, you can ask them direct questions about their positions and really go in depth about what they like about the company as well. Again, like back to the first date thing, it's not just about you, it's about them as well. They don't want to just hear about you. They also want to talk a little bit about their experiences, to make sure that you are a proper fit for the company.
Ooh, I like that question about body language. It's super important, because as soon as you walk into an interview room, they're looking at you. So you want to make sure that if you're wearing heels, you want to make sure you're able to walk in it, right? Before you sit down, and before you, like, you should probably shake their hand before you do. And like, as Amna said, you don't want to be like sitting there like super stern, just like with your back straight. You kind of want to be a little relaxed so that they can see, but not too relaxed. Like, you shouldn't be slouching. You should probably have your hands down, not on the table most of the time. But they're looking at you because you're going to be representing that company later on. So if you're going to a client, or if you're talking to external people in the company, they want to make sure that you're not someone who's going to represent them poorly.
Mm-hmm. You can also take this as don't ever look at your phone during an interview. I remember this one interview that we were having with a group. One girl actually got a phone call during the interview, and instead of just silencing it and like continuing with what she was doing, she answered the phone and walked out of the room. It was super distracting for everyone there. It really like took away from the whole experience, and it made us kind of had to reset our tone back to where we were over like a minute or two, just because this one person had this interruption. And especially in a like one-on-one scenario, it's going to make it really hard to get back on that good start you might have had before. So really make sure, turn off your phone during the interview.
Or don't even bring it in if you don't really need it.
She was getting a call about another interview, actually, Tyler. It's true.
Someone said, is moving hands too much a bad sign trait in an interview? Not necessarily, no, but because a lot of people use their hands to talk, to explain things, and it's I actually watched a TED Talk on it where using your hands can actually make people remember things more. So it's not bad, but you want to contain it. You don't want to be all over the place, right? You want to make sure that that box that you're in, like, you have that. I believe you. So yeah, move your hands. Make sure it's not distracting though. So kind of monitor yourself. One thing that I did once is I recorded myself talking to see how much I really do move my hands, and it was a lot. So I tried to be a little conscious about it, and I'm really better about it now. But it's not the worst thing, no.
Mm-hmm. And especially if you are someone who uses their hands a lot when you're talking, a lot of the times, if you're trying to consciously stop yourself from doing that, you're not thinking about the question more, you're not focusing on the interview as much, you're focusing on not being that kind of person. Just let it come out and let yourself like be true while you do the interview, because again, being honest is really important because it shows them that you're the person that they want to work with. Eye contact. So I think eye contact is another thing where it kind of ties in with body language. You want to show that you're interested in what's going on. You don't really want to be looking away much. If you like need to reference something on your resume, feel free to look down, but a lot of the times you want to be looking at them. A tip that I learned in high school, actually, from some of my friends that were in high school debate, they would always just stare at like the nose bridge of the person instead of their eyes directly, because it's kind of weird to stare right at someone. So just like still be looking in their general direction, but you don't necessarily have to be making direct eye contact.
Yeah, it's okay to look away for a second. It's okay to break eye contact. You don't have to like stare. It's not like a staring contest. You don't have to like look at them like 24 throughout the whole interview. It's fine to break away eye contact. It's kind of more comfortable that way, because I know if I was interviewing something, Can we recap the shadowing experience to be added? So yeah, if you have a shadowing experience, you can definitely add it under your work experience. So if you are in the law field, so you can say that you shadowed, I don't know, Cole, do you know what lawyers do?
No, I don't know what lawyers do either. Bad example.
So you can say that you watched your attorney interview or talk to their client, or you watched them, I don't know, handle phone calls or a conflict, something like that, but more like quantitative and stuff like that, obviously. Or if you're in the medicine field, you can also say that you watched your person look like at X amount of patients, or you saw them do a surgery, because I know like a lot of people do that too, X amount of surgeries. You can say that, or like kind of write down what you learned about that as well.
Mm-hmm. And usually if you have a shadowing experience, you're usually shadowing a person. So talk to that person about it as well. They have a real job, so they probably have a pretty good resume. So feel free to talk about, ask them about it, ask them to review your resume with you. People who have jobs are usually pretty good at this, so it's pretty good to look into them. Also, another resource that's really good for helping you review your resume and really improve it and make it the best it can be is a career center on your campus. I know I've been to the RIT's Career Center so many times, and it's really, really a good experience, because there are people who have to stay up to date with your major specific requirements. They're in contact with alumni in your field and can get you connections a lot easier than it might be just connecting with random people on LinkedIn. So definitely go and talk to your career center, as well as any professors that are in your major, especially if one has had a job in industry that you would want in the future. Talk to them about that experience. What are some things that you can do to separate yourself from the group of people applying to a job? They might have connections that they might be willing to offer you to get you closer to that position that you want. So talk to everyone about your resume.
So yeah, I think we're close to the general session, like the award session. So I think we should move on.
Yes, we should start wrapping up. Sorry, there's a lot of more good questions.
I know, it's awesome. I love, so yeah, if you guys do have more questions, find Cole or I on Facebook. Those are our emails. They're pretty simple. It's our first name, last name at alabamacirclek.org, and then his is New York Circle K, nycirclek.org. But thank you guys so much for joining us. I really hope that you guys took away something important from this, and that you guys can apply this. I hope that you enjoy the rest of CCAI Next.
Have a good one, everybody.